course, we're talking in stereotypes here and in very broad categories, but you can certainly find a teacher of a particular ideology who might be very committed to that, but is open enough and respectful enough to be able to draw proper boundaries, to get across multiple sides, even whether he's a more secular, more religious, someone who understands and respects the students enough to present a more complex view. So there are individual teachers who might be quite talented and also respectful enough that we don't have to apply these stereotypes. The next issue, I guess, flows from this. The modern Orthodox day school has been called a ghetto of openness. Okay, so the question is the day school best cultivated as a place that's open to the world and inviting the influence of world culture and the cultural context that we're in? Or is it best cultivated as more of a, what was a tough word, cloistered environment? That's a tough word. A mixed metaphor. But is it, and here we have to also factor in the age of the students involved. Might this be a little bit different for elementary school versus high school? How open or how ghettoized should the day school be?
From what I've read about the beginnings of Maimonides, there was serious opposition in Boston to the very idea of creating a separate school for Jewish kids. The ideal was that the kids should be going to public school and then getting a Jewish education afterwards. This was true, I would say, not only in the Orthodox world, but even more so outside the Orthodox world, where to this day, in the Reform movement, I don't think you would have to take your shoes off to count the number of Reform day schools that exist. Even as sociologists like Stephen Cohen have found that day schools are the most effective method of keeping young people involved religiously. So here, on some level, the question is, what is the general relationship that we and our kids have with the world outside? American culture is very, very pervasive. Not only in the Jewish community, around the world, American culture is very, very pervasive. And even in communities where families, children's schools are very much try to cloister themselves, it's very hard to do that. So one has to make a decision here about what direction they want to take as far as this is concerned.
It seems to me that there has to be a very self-conscious attempt to gradually expose children to the greater world, not necessarily to do it in an irresponsible fashion. To give you, I wrote a paper a while ago that you can find on the net, where I argue that the typical day school education is very likely to turn children into bigots. Because all of the non-Jews that they encounter in their Jewish studies, certainly, and in Jewish history, etc., virtually all of them are not very nice people. And so if people are going to essentially gain a certain perception of the non-Jewish world through their Jewish studies, that could be rather counterproductive. So what do you do about that? In other words, how can you make sure that there's a more balanced kind of approach? Well, it means by a self-conscious attempt to try to control that environment by introducing certain teachers, introducing certain speakers, creating certain events during the course of a child's education where they are not completely, they're out on their own and therefore they have to fend for themselves, but where you can give them a certain amount of guidance. In terms of our own children, our younger daughter, who was very very interested in the arts, she began to go and take art classes in D.C. She would go with the Metro downtown. And this was her first, she went between her sophomore and junior years in high school. This was her first exposure to the kids in those classes, but she would come home every day also, and we would talk about her experiences. Our older daughter went to a women's engineering course in the summer at Maryland between her junior and senior years. She dormed with 3 non-Jewish kids. It was very interesting for her to have that exposure, but again, this was not how she was going to now have to deal with the rest of her life. She invited them home for Shabbat and everything else, and so therefore, again, it was a sort of a gradual kind of exposure. And I think that that kind of self-conscious way of, on the one hand, being concerned about identity formation of the adolescent, but at the same time not giving them the impression that they are completely cut off. The general, non-Jewish teachers on the faculty are very important in that role as well. And so back to, the comment that you made, very often those people are very spiritual people and very positive role models, for children. So I think, again, a self-conscious attempt has to be made to gradually expose our children to that wider world, and therefore it wouldn't be as much of a culture shock when they finally will enter into that world, whether it's in university or afterwards.
We now move from organizational issues to what we would call methodological issues. This is a question that was submitted. It goes like this. Day schools have traditionally put a lot of emphasis on building students' textual skills. Today, the Tanakh, commentaries, halachot, are all available in translation as well as online. While textual skills are important, are we spending too much time on them at the expense of developing our children's spiritual lives? It seems that today, more than ever, the non-Torah world has a strong grip on our kids. Wouldn't we be wise to spend more time in school learning and doing things that foster a love of Judaism and a knowledge of its core ideas, beliefs, and history? That's the question.
I'm just going to say that Rabbi Bieler has written extensively on Lookjet about this, so I'm going to turn the question over to him.
I thought I had a little time to get my thoughts together. I for one, am very, I think the concept of creating lifelong learners is exactly what we should be about. It would be a mistake to think that a person's Jewish education, it's okay for that education to be concluded at 12th grade or even grades before that, or even that it be concluded in Israel. I think the whole point is to try to engender commitment where a person will continue to study and to allow his ideas to evolve and to apply those skills. So once that's said, so therefore that will have an effect upon curriculum and also on skills that we wish to impart. There was an article in, not the last Jewish Action, 2 Jewish Actions ago, where I talked about certain impressions that I got from Chaim Sabato's novel. The English translation was Adjusting Sights, where it was very striking to me that it's about his experience and his friends in the 73 war and tanks in the Golan, where when they were in extremis, all sorts of Mamarei Chazal and things in Tanakh would come to their minds, which would help them get through very difficult circumstances, which set me thinking, are we teaching memorable things in our curriculum? Are we teaching things that have the potential to stand someone in good stead down the road in terms of his life, as opposed to factoids, or as I like to refer to them, holy trivia, which are many, many different pieces of information which will probably be forgotten relatively quickly. So even if skills, I believe that you can teach skills with virtually any text. And so therefore I would say, yes, skills are important. However, the subject matter that those skills should be focused on is subject matter that should be memorable, that has a chance. You want to teach Sefer Tehillim? Well, what parts of Sefer Tehillim might really be memorable? What parts, Sugyot in the Gemara, would be memorable, etc.? There you would have a greater likelihood, it seems to me, that there will be a long-term commitment with regard to what students will love and will learn down the road.